The rain came down in steady ribbons over the quiet suburbs of Omaha that Friday night, March 12, 1993. Streetlights shimmered in puddles, and the air smelled faintly of wet earth and gasoline. 16-year-old Amanda Fields stood by the front window of her family's small two-story house, clutching her denim jacket. Her mother's voice came from the kitchen, soft but worried. "Do you want me to drive you, honey? It's getting bad out there." Amanda shook her head, adjusting her backpack strap. "It's just a few blocks, Mom. I'll be fine." Linda Fields hesitated. She'd said those same words to her daughter 100 times, but tonight something in her chest felt tight, a weight she couldn't name. Robert, Amanda's father, looked up from the couch where the TV murmured low. "Be home by 11. Call if you need anything." Amanda smiled faintly. "I will." She left into the drizzle, the porch light framing her silhouette, before she disappeared down the street, pushing her bike through the slick darkness. The Fields clock read 6:47 p.m. It was the last time they saw her alive. The Danners lived on Birchwood Lane, a quiet cul-de-sac lined with trimmed lawns and maple trees. Amanda often babysat for them, two little kids who adored her. She arrived around 7:10, dripping rainwater, greeted by the scent of microwave popcorn and the distant sound of cartoons. Mrs. Danner thanked her, handed her $20 in advance, and hurried out with her husband for a church dinner across town. By 9 p.m. the storm grew worse. Thunder rolled low across the plains. Neighbors later recalled seeing flashes of lightning slicing through the sky, the kind that made the horizon look alive. Inside the Danner home, Amanda put the children to bed, then settled on the couch with a book she'd brought from home. She was reading The Outsiders, her favorite, when the power flickered once, twice, and went out completely. At 11 p.m., according to the Danners, they returned home. The lights had come back on, the house quiet. The kids were asleep. Amanda was gone. Her denim jacket was missing from the coat rack, but her backpack sat by the door untouched. They assumed she had left for home, but when she didn't arrive and her parents called the next morning, confusion turned to panic. The police found her bike near a cornfield, less than half a mile from the Danners' house. Its tires muddy, the handlebars bent slightly, as if it had fallen hard. Detective Tom Gallagher, the officer assigned to the case, arrived before sunrise. He looked at the bike, then at the vast stretch of field fading into grey mist. "No tracks, no struggle," he muttered. She vanished. Omaha was a city that liked to believe it was safe, but that morning the illusion cracked. Flyers went up. Volunteers searched ditches and barns. The Fields family stood in front of local news cameras begging for answers. Stories like this remind us how truth hides behind ordinary nights, and if you want to keep uncovering them, stay with us. Detective Tom Gallagher stared at the map pinned to the wall of the Omaha Police Department's small conference room. Dozens of red pushpins marked the search grid, stretching from Birchwood Lane to the muddy fields beyond Interstate 80. It had been 3 days since Amanda Fields disappeared, and every hour felt heavier than the last. Gallagher was in his mid-40s, built broad from years on the force, with the quiet weariness of a man who'd seen too many families break under unanswered questions. He'd led missing persons cases before, but this one felt different, closer, quieter, as if something inside the town itself was resisting him. At the morning briefing, Sergeant Hayes cleared his throat. Search teams found nothing new overnight. Still no witnesses who saw her after 10. Gallagher nodded, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Keep canvassing Birchwood and Elm. Someone saw something. They just don't know it yet." He spent the afternoon interviewing neighbors again. Mrs. Danner stood on her porch, eyes rimmed with red. "Detective, she was here when we left. We told her we'd be back by 11. When we returned, she was gone. I thought maybe her parents picked her up." "Did she say anything unusual that evening?" Gallagher asked. Mrs. Danner hesitated, twisting her wedding ring. "She seemed distracted. She kept checking the window." Mr. Danner interrupted from behind her. It was raining. Maybe she just didn't want to get caught in it. Gallagher's eyes lingered on him for a moment. "Mind if I take a look around again?" The Danners exchanged a glance before letting him inside. The living room smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and candle wax. Toys were stacked neatly, the floor spotless. Gallagher noted the couch cushions, freshly washed, their faint detergent scent too new for comfort. But without physical evidence, all he had was suspicions. By nightfall, the search expanded beyond the neighborhood. Dozens of volunteers scoured fields with flashlights, calling Amanda's name into the wind. Her mother, Linda, stood among them, holding a flashlight that trembled in her hands. "Tom," she said when he approached, "you'll find her, right?" Gallagher met her eyes, the question cutting deeper than she knew. "We're doing everything we can, Mrs. Fields." Back at the station, the phone rang off the hook. False tips, teenagers claiming sightings, truck drivers reporting girls who looked like her across the state. Each lead dissolved under scrutiny. By the end of the week, Gallagher sat alone in his office, the rain now replaced by a brittle cold that crept under the window frame. He flipped through his notes, timelines, statements, maps. Every path led to the same dead end. He whispered to himself, "Where did you go, Amanda?" On his desk, a Polaroid of the Fields family stared back, Amanda's bright smile framed between her parents. He studied it, searching for something he'd missed. Outside, Omaha slept uneasily. Porch lights stayed on longer that week. Parents drove their kids to school instead of letting them walk. The illusion of safety was gone. And somewhere in that silence, Tom Gallagher promised himself one thing. He would not let Amanda Fields become another name lost to time. The Fields' home on North 68th Street had once been filled with laughter. Photos lined the walls, birthdays, Christmas mornings, Amanda's first day of school. But now everything felt heavy, muted. The clock in the living room ticked too loudly, and the air carried the faint scent of coffee left to burn on the stove. Linda Fields sat at the kitchen table, staring at the phone as if she could will it to ring. Her hands shook as she folded another flyer with Amanda's face on it. 16 years old, she whispered. How does a girl just disappear? Robert Fields entered quietly, still in his work uniform from the auto shop. He carried the exhaustion of a man pretending to be strong. "You need to eat something," he said softly. "I can't," Linda replied, her eyes red from sleepless nights. "Every time I close my eyes, I see her bike. Just sitting there in that mud." Robert hesitated before sitting down across from her. "The police are doing what they can. Gallagher seems like a good man." "He doesn't look at me the way the others do," Linda murmured. "The neighbors, the church ladies, they think we did something wrong, like we failed her." Robert sighed, rubbing his temples. People talk when they're scared. They don't know what else to do. Silence hung between them. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. Upstairs, Amanda's room remained untouched. Linda refused to let anyone move a thing. The bed was neatly made, the window slightly open, letting in the late March chill. A half-finished sketch lay on her desk, 2 girls standing by a riverbank, one holding a kite. Linda traced her fingers over the pencil lines, her throat tightening. A knock came at the door. Detective Gallagher stood outside, hat in hand, his expression grave. "Mr. and Mrs. Fields, may I come in?" Robert nodded, leading him to the kitchen. Gallagher opened his notebook. "We're still following every lead. I wanted to ask, did Amanda have any reason to leave home that night?" "Any arguments, trouble at school?" Linda's face tightened. "No, she was happy. She loved those kids she babysat." Gallagher studied her carefully. "Sometimes teenagers hide things. Friends, relationships, something they're afraid to talk about." Robert's tone sharpened. "You think she ran away?" "No," Gallagher said quietly. "I think something happened to her. But we have to understand her life if we're going to find her." Linda's composure broke. "She didn't run away. Amanda was a good girl. She always called when she was late." Her voice cracked. "She wouldn't leave us." Gallagher closed his notebook, nodding gently. "We'll find her, Mrs. Fields, I promise." After he left, Robert leaned against the counter, his jaw tight. "Promises don't mean much, do they?" Linda didn't answer. She walked back to Amanda's room, her steps slow, deliberate. The setting sun cast a pale orange glow across the walls, catching the edges of old photographs. Amanda laughing, Amanda holding her dog, Amanda alive in moments that now felt like dreams. Linda whispered to the silence, "I won't stop looking for you." By the third week after Amanda's disappearance, Omaha had stopped pretending everything was fine. The posters with her photo had faded from the rain, corners curling on lampposts. The neighborhood that once felt safe now carried the uneasy quiet of people who locked their doors before dark. At the Fields Church, whispers began to replace prayers. Some said a stranger had taken her. Others said she'd run away with a boy. Rumors filled the space where facts were missing. Linda Fields heard them all, each one like a knife turned slowly. At Gallagher's desk downtown, the case files were growing thick, dozens of statements, none matching. He replayed Amanda's last known hours again and again. There were no witnesses, no car seen, no sound heard, only that bike lying near the field. He called in Amanda's boyfriend, Ethan Cole, a quiet 17-year-old with nervous eyes and a bruise on his knuckle. Ethan sat across from him, gripping his baseball cap. "I didn't do anything, detective, I swear." Gallagher leaned back. "I'm not saying you did. I just need to know if Amanda mentioned anyone bothering her." Ethan hesitated. "She said someone was following her. Not like stalking, but she thought a car was showing up near her bus stop. A dark pickup. She said it made her feel weird." Gallagher wrote it down carefully. "You tell anyone else about this?" "No, sir. I didn't think it was real." "I wish I had." That night, Gallagher drove out to Birchwood Lane again. The Danner house stood dark except for a single light in the kitchen window. He parked nearby, letting the engine idle. The silence pressed in. Somewhere, a dog barked. He couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was right there, just buried beneath politeness and small-town smiles. The next morning, Linda met with him again at the station. She brought a small photo album, flipping through pictures of Amanda with her friends. "She was talking less lately," Linda said, "like something was bothering her. I thought it was just teenage moods." Gallagher nodded. "Do you remember anyone new in her life, a friend, a teacher?" Linda frowned. "She used to babysit for the Danners almost every Friday. She liked their little girl, Katie. But she told me once she didn't like being in that house when the parents weren't home. She didn't say why." Gallagher's pen stopped mid-note. "Did she say anything else?" "No," Linda whispered. "I didn't ask." "I should have." Outside the police station, the wind had turned colder, cutting through the trees like a blade. Gallagher watched Linda drive away, her taillights disappearing into the gray Nebraska morning. He stood there for a long time, thinking about the small things people ignore, the uneasy looks, the half-finished sentences, the details that only matter once it's too late. Back at his desk, he wrote a single line in his report: "Investigate Danner residence further." Then he closed the file, his jaw tightening. He didn't know it yet, but that one note would follow him for the rest of his life. By the summer of 1999, the Fields case had become another file collecting dust in the basement of the Omaha Police Department. 6 years had passed since Amanda vanished, and the once vibrant search effort had dissolved into silence. Newspapers stopped calling, reporters stopped asking. The world had moved on, but Tom Gallagher hadn't. He sat in his dimly lit office, the glow of a single desk lamp washing over stacks of folders. The case number, 93-1247, was etched into his mind. Every night he told himself he'd stop reopening that file. Every night he didn't. His partner, Detective Alan Ruiz, leaned against the doorframe. "You're still at it, huh?" Gallagher didn't look up. "There's something we missed." Ruiz sighed. "We've been over it 100 times. No body, no prints, no witnesses. The Danners moved to Lincoln. The Fields moved to Lincoln. The kid, Ethan, left for college. There's nothing left, Tom." Gallagher flipped another page, the sound of paper brittle from time. "There's always something left." Outside, the Nebraska summer sun blazed hot against the windows, but inside, the chill of failure clung to the air. The police department had reorganized twice since 1993. New detectives came in, eager and bright-eyed, looking at Gallagher like he was a relic. Maybe he was. At home, the silence was worse. His wife had stopped waiting up for him years ago. He'd stare at the framed photo of Amanda Fields that still sat on his mantel, a constant reminder of the one that got away. In Lincoln, Linda and Robert Fields tried to rebuild what was left of their lives. They had sold their Omaha house, and moved into a small bungalow near the edge of town. Linda had taken a job at a grocery store. Robert worked nights at a repair shop. Their days moved in routine, quiet and colorless. But Amanda's room, even in the new house, remained untouched. Her drawings and school books had followed them, boxed carefully, as if waiting for her return. Every year on March 12th, Linda lit a candle by the window. "In case she's out there," she told Robert. He didn't argue. He just stood beside her, eyes fixed on the small flame. Back in Omaha, the cold case unit was being downsized. Gallagher packed his files into boxes, his desk stripped bare. Before leaving, he paused with Amanda's case file in hand. "You deserved better," he whispered, slipping it into his briefcase instead of the archive shelf. When he retired later that year, the department held a small send-off. Someone handed him a gold watch. Someone else made a toast. But all Gallagher could think about was the rain-soaked night in 1993, the empty road, and the bike left in the mud. As he walked out of the building for the last time, the file felt heavy under his arm. He didn't know if it was guilt or purpose that made him keep it, but deep down, he knew he'd never really stopped being a detective, not while Amanda was still missing. The year was 2023 when Rachel Ward first stumbled across Amanda Field's case. A young journalist for the Omaha World-Herald, Rachel had become known for her dedication to cold cases, and her latest project was a podcast about unsolved mysteries in Nebraska. The more she dug, the more she realized that Amanda's story, an open wound for the town, deserved attention again. Rachel sat in her cluttered apartment one rainy Thursday afternoon, combing through archived files. A faded clipping caught her eye. Omaha teen missing after babysitting job. No leads, case goes cold. The photo of Amanda, young and smiling, was clipped to the top of the article. Something about the picture stayed with Rachel as she scrolled through the details. The case had gone silent after a few months, then disappeared altogether. 16 years old, Rachel whispered to herself. Why wasn't this solved? Her fingers flew over the keyboard, searching deeper into the case. There was something unsettling about the way the investigation had fizzled out. No body was ever found. No suspects. No closure. But Rachel knew there was a pattern here, a buried thread that needed to be pulled. The following morning, Rachel drove to the Omaha Police Department. Her nerves buzzed under her calm exterior as she waited in the lobby. The station had changed a lot over the years. It felt smaller now, the buzz of activity replaced by the quieter hum of officers and outdated filing cabinets. Detective Tom Gallagher had retired long ago. His name still lingered on old case files, but he was a ghost to most of the newer staff. Rachel had heard of him, though, his passion for the case, his unwillingness to let go. She wasn't sure if it was his age or his silence that gave him an air of mystery, but the stories about him were enough to fuel her curiosity. She approached the front desk, where a young officer looked up at her. "Hi," Rachel began, her voice steady despite the tremor of excitement beneath. "I'm Rachel Ward. I'm researching cold cases for a podcast, and I'm looking into Amanda Fields. I was wondering if I could speak with Detective Gallagher or someone who worked on the case." The officer's face turned neutral. "That case is closed. Nothing new to report." Rachel pressed, her tone polite but firm. "I understand, but I found some new leads. I think there's more to the story than anyone realizes. I'd really like to speak with someone who was involved." The officer hesitated, then nodded slowly. "All right, give me a moment." Minutes later, Gallagher's name appeared on a whiteboard in the back office. Rachel followed the officer down the hallway to a small, dimly lit room. There, sitting behind a desk cluttered with papers, was Tom Gallagher himself. His hair had gone completely grey, but his eyes were still sharp. His posture was tired but not defeated. "Ms. Ward," Gallagher said, his voice low but warm. "I've heard about you. Cold cases, true crime." Rachel offered him a tight smile. "I was hoping you could help me with one, the Amanda Fields case." Gallagher didn't speak right away. He just looked at her, his gaze hard, as if he were measuring her intentions. Finally he spoke, his voice rough with age and regret. "I've spent my life chasing that case. You should be careful. There are some things people don't want uncovered." Rachel didn't flinch. I'm not afraid of the truth, Detective. I just need answers. Gallagher nodded, his fingers tapping against his desk. All right. Let's start with what you found. It wasn't long before the unease crept back into Gallagher's bones. The familiar weight of doubt, the feeling that the case had always been just out of reach, gnawed at him again. Rachel Ward had piqued something in him, something long buried. Mark Danner, Gallagher said, his voice rough. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. We need to look into him again. Rachel had been sitting across from him, quietly listening, but now her eyes sharpened. Mark Danner? The one who lived on Birchwood Lane? Gallagher nodded. His family hired Amanda to babysit for years, but something was off about him back then. I didn't have enough to go on, but now, looking back, it all makes sense. Rachel flipped open her notebook. What did you notice? Gallagher hesitated, as though weighing the significance of his own thoughts. When I questioned the Danners in 1993, Mark seemed defensive, like he was hiding something. But at the time, there was no reason to dig deeper. Rachel leaned in, her pen poised. What do you think he was hiding? The way he acted around Amanda, Gallagher said slowly. It was subtle, awkward glances, a strange tone whenever I asked about her. And then, the night she went missing, he claimed he didn't see her after she left their house. But I don't buy it. Something about his alibi didn't sit right. Rachel scribbled quickly, her mind racing. You think he's involved? What makes you so sure? Gallagher sighed, standing up and walking to the window. He gazed out at the cloudy sky, hands shoved in his pockets. I don't know if he's the one who took her, but I know he knows more than he's letting on, and I didn't push him hard enough. I should have. Rachel studied him for a moment. What do we do now? Gallagher turned back, his expression hardening. We dig into his past. Find out where he was, who he was with. His life has moved on. He's married now, with kids. But there's a trail, I'm sure of it. The storm outside had grown louder, and the heavy sound of rain against the window felt like a beating pulse. Rachel nodded, her resolve strengthening. I'll track him down. Gallagher glanced at her, then gave a small nod. Be careful. Mark Danner may have gotten away with this for a long time, but people like him don't let go easily. As Rachel left the station, the clouds above Omaha seemed to darken even further. The city's quiet streets felt heavier now, as though every shadow contained a secret. The hunt for answers was far from over, but Rachel could feel something shifting in the air. She was getting closer, and the truth was just around the corner. In the back of her mind she knew one thing. Someone was hiding the truth, and she would stop at nothing to uncover it. Rachel spent the next few days tracking down anyone who might have known Amanda in those last months before her disappearance. The case, like an abandoned house, had begun to feel haunted, full of whispers, forgotten clues, and half-remembered faces. But Rachel was determined. She felt like she was piecing together a puzzle, and every interview brought her closer to the truth. The first stop was Ethan Cole, Amanda's boyfriend at the time. He had moved away after high school, settling in Lincoln, but Rachel was able to track him down through social media. He agreed to meet her at a local coffee shop, a place that felt too bright and too warm for the weight of their conversation. Ethan was nervous, his eyes darting around as Rachel sat down across from him. I don't know if I can help you, he said, the words coming out in a rush as though he had been rehearsing them. You were close to Amanda, Rachel said, her voice steady. I need to know everything you can remember, even the small details, anything that could help us understand what happened. Ethan shifted in his seat, his fingers tapping on the edge of his cup. He stopped, looking down as though trying to pull memories from a long-forgotten place. She was scared sometimes. Toward the end, she kept talking about feeling like she was being watched. Rachel leaned forward. Watched? By who? I don't know. She never said, but she got real quiet about it, like she was afraid someone might be following her. Rachel's heart tightened. She had heard rumors about Amanda feeling unsettled, but hearing it from Ethan added weight to those whispers. Did she say anything else? Anything that might point to who could have been following her? Ethan hesitated, then shook his head. She didn't trust me with everything. I think she was trying to protect me from whatever was going on. Rachel gave him a moment, allowing the silence to settle between them. Did she ever mention anyone in particular? Someone who might have made her feel this way? Ethan's gaze shifted to the window, his expression distant. There was this guy, Mark Danner. He was friends with my dad. He would sometimes show up at our house when Amanda was over, and there was something off about him. Not that he ever did anything, but I don't know. She seemed uncomfortable around him. The name sent a chill down Rachel's spine. Mark Danner. She had heard it before. She scribbled it down quickly. Did you ever tell Amanda's parents about this? No, Ethan said quietly, shaking his head. I don't think she ever told them. I don't even think she told her best friend, Emily. She didn't want anyone to know she was worried about it. She was always trying to be brave. Rachel's pen hovered over her notebook, her mind racing. This was the break she needed. Mark Danner's name had come up twice now, in the whispers of Ethan's past and in Gallagher's suspicion. Something was beginning to click. As she stood up to leave, Rachel looked at Ethan one last time. If you remember anything else, no matter how small, please call me. Ethan nodded, his eyes filled with the burden of unspoken guilt. I will. Outside, the air felt heavy, the first signs of a storm building on the horizon. Rachel felt like she was standing on the edge of something big, something she wasn't sure she was ready for. But she had come this far, and there was no turning back now. The truth was waiting, just beyond the next door, and Rachel was determined to knock. Rachel's pulse quickened as she walked back to her car. The interview with Ethan had been everything she had hoped for, and more. Mark Danner's name now hung over the case like a dark cloud, and the feeling that they were on the verge of breaking it wide open settled in her gut. But there was still so much left to uncover, so much to risk. The storm Rachel had sensed earlier in the day was now in full force. The sky had darkened, and the air felt thick with anticipation, mirroring the feeling in her chest. She called Gallagher as soon as she was in her car, the rain pouring against the windows like an urgent reminder that time was running out. Gallagher, he answered, his voice gravelly from years of use. I just spoke to Ethan Cole, Rachel said, her voice tight with excitement. He confirmed that Amanda was scared, said she thought someone was following her. There was a brief silence on the other end. And, Gallagher asked, though the tone of his voice betrayed the anxiety he'd been carrying for years. Ethan said it was Mark Danner, Rachel continued, her words tumbling out faster than she could process them. He was an older guy, always hanging around when Amanda babysat. Ethan says Amanda didn't feel safe around him, but she didn't want to tell anyone. I think she was too afraid of what might happen if she did. Rachel could hear Gallagher's breathing pick up, a mix of frustration and determination. That's what I've been telling you, Rachel. I told you there was something off about Danner. I'm going to track him down, Rachel said, determination flooding her voice. We need to know where he was that night. I'll help you. But don't make the mistake I did, Gallagher warned, his voice dark with the weight of experience. Mark Danner doesn't take well to being cornered. You don't know him like I do. Rachel's grip on the steering wheel tightened. She had been ready for this moment, but the threat in Gallagher's voice gave her pause. Still, she wasn't backing down. She had made a promise to Amanda's family and to herself to find the truth. I'm not afraid of him, Rachel replied, her voice steady. But I'll be careful. We're getting closer, Gallagher. I can feel it. When Rachel hung up, she sat in the car for a moment, the rain now beating against the roof in an almost rhythmic pattern. She stared out at the darkened street, watching the blurred shapes of passing cars, feeling the weight of the investigation pressed down on her chest. This was no longer just about solving a case. It was about confronting a town's hidden secrets. As Rachel drove toward Mark Danner's home in Council Bluffs, her thoughts swirled. She thought about Amanda, the girl who had been too young to know how to protect herself from the men who lurked in the shadows. And she thought about Gallagher, a man who had spent his life chasing a ghost unable to put the past to rest. She was ready to break the silence. But the question lingered in her mind. Would Mark Danner finally admit what he had done, Or had he buried his secrets too deep to be uncovered? The answers were just ahead. The phone call came on a chilly Thursday morning, breaking the silence that had settled over Rachel's office. She had spent the previous night combing through old case files and rereading every note she'd taken during her interviews. But the truth still felt elusive, just out of reach. The investigation was starting to feel like a dead end. When the phone rang, she grabbed it on the first ring, her heart already racing. "Ms. Ward." The voice on the other end was clear, official. "This is Detective Ramirez from the Cold Case Unit. We've got results on the DNA evidence from the bike." Rachel sat up straight, her breath catching in her throat. "What did you find?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's a match." Rachel froze, the words hanging in the air like a storm cloud about to break. She pressed the receiver harder against her ear, urging him to continue. "A match to who?" "Mark Danner." The words hit her like a punch. "We've confirmed that his DNA was found on Amanda Fields' bike handle." Rachel's mind raced as she sat back in her chair, trying to process the enormity of what she had just heard. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but now the question was, how far had Danner gone to cover his tracks? She took a deep breath, her fingers gripping the edge of the desk as the weight of the revelation sunk in. "How soon can you make an arrest?" she asked, her voice tight with anticipation. "Not yet," Ramirez replied. "We still need to confirm the full scope of his involvement. But this is the break we needed, Rachel. We're pulling everything together now." "Thank you," Rachel said, hanging up the phone slowly, her mind still spinning. For a moment, everything went still. The storm outside, the hum of her computer, the faint sound of traffic in the distance, all of it felt like a distant echo. Rachel was both relieved and unsettled. The truth was within reach, but now she had to confront the most difficult part, bringing Mark Danner to justice. She sat in silence, staring at the file on her desk, Amanda's case file, the same one Gallagher had carried for years. Now, after decades of waiting, the answers were finally here. Rachel's phone buzzed again, but this time it was a text from Gallagher. "We need to talk." "It's time." Rachel's heart skipped a beat. She had known the day would come when they'd have to face Danner. It was time to make him speak, to make him face the consequences of his actions. Rachel stood up and grabbed her jacket, her mind already racing with the next steps. She was getting closer, but she couldn't afford to slow down now. The investigation was no longer just a case. It was personal. Amanda Fields deserved to be heard, and Rachel was the one who would finally make sure her voice was not silenced. Rachel stood in the small, sterile interrogation room, the hum of the fluorescent lights buzzing above her head. The room felt suffocating, despite the cooling air outside. The cold case had gone from a quiet, distant memory to an open wound, and now, with the DNA evidence and Gallagher by her side, she was finally here. They were about to face Mark Danner. Gallagher sat across from her, his face tired but determined. He'd been chasing this case for over 30 years, and today it felt like the end was finally within reach. The door opened, and Mark Danner was escorted in, his hands cuffed in front of him. He looked much older than he had in the 1990s. Grey hair, weathered face, but the same calculating eyes that had haunted Rachel's thoughts for days. He sat down without a word, his posture stiff. Gallagher didn't waste any time. "Mark, we've got your DNA." "It's on Amanda Fields' bike." Danner's eyes flickered for just a second, the briefest sign of panic, but he quickly masked it. "You don't have anything on me," he said, his voice low, but his hands were trembling slightly. Rachel leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "We know what happened that night, Mark. We know you were there." "We know what you did," he scoffed, looking away as if trying to dismiss them, but Rachel could see the cracks in his facade. He was scared, and that fear gave her a surge of confidence. "You can try to deny it," she continued, her voice unwavering. "But the truth is in that DNA. You can't run from it anymore." For a long moment, Danner said nothing. The room was heavy with the silence between them, the weight of years of lies and cover-ups. Rachel could feel the tension tightening around them, the moment teetering on the edge of something that could either break or bind the truth forever. Finally, Danner shifted in his chair, his voice barely above a whisper. It was an accident. Gallagher's eyes narrowed. An accident? Dana swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. She didn't want to stay. She said she was going to leave. She wouldn't listen. His voice wavered, as though he were trying to convince himself as much as them. I just wanted her to stay. I didn't want her to leave me. Rachel's heart raced as she listened to his words, the faint tremble in his voice telling her everything she needed to know. You hurt her. It wasn't a question. It was a fact, one that had been hanging in the air for years. Dana's face crumpled as he broke, his shoulders shaking with the weight of his confession. I never meant for it to happen. I just wanted her to stay. Then you took her, Rachel said, her voice low and steady, and you left her there to die. The room felt unbearably small as Dana's confession hung in the air, settling over them like a suffocating weight. He had done it. He had taken Amanda Fields' life, and for over 30 years he had lived with the secret. Gallagher's voice was hard as he spoke. You'll never get away with it again. Dana's eyes were empty now, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The truth had finally come out, and there was no hiding from it anymore. Rachel felt a rush of relief, but it was quickly tempered by the weight of the years that had been lost, years Amanda's family would never get back. She looked at Gallagher, and for the first time in a long time she saw something in his eyes. The peace that came from knowing the truth had finally won. The case was over. But the journey to get there had been long, and the scars would remain forever. The phone call came just as Rachel was finishing her notes in the car. It was a simple notification, but it carried the weight of a finality that echoed through her chest. Amanda Fields has been found. The case is officially closed, the voice on the other end of the line said. Rachel paused, her grip tightening on the wheel. For a moment, it felt like the ground beneath her had shifted, but she couldn't quite grasp whether it was relief or sorrow that flooded her veins. After all the years of chasing shadows, after the hunt for every last piece of evidence, the truth was finally exposed. But with that truth came the weight of knowing that no amount of time could undo the hurt Amanda's family had suffered. She parked outside her apartment, her heart beating heavily. She thought of Linda Fields, who had carried the burden of her daughter's disappearance all these years. She could only imagine the emotion that was welling inside Linda now, grief mixed with the bittersweet taste of closure. Rachel's phone buzzed again, and this time it was a message from Gallagher. I'll meet you at the Fields' house. Rachel nodded to herself, though she knew Gallagher didn't need to be the one to say it. It was time to give Amanda's family the closure they had waited for, the closure they deserved. At the Fields' modest home, Rachel found Linda sitting in the living room, her eyes red from hours of crying. Yet there was a softness to her face. For the first time in so long, she looked like someone who had let go of a deep, endless weight. Linda looked up as Rachel entered, and without a word she stood, meeting Rachel with a steady, searching gaze. "He confessed, didn't he?" Linda asked, her voice raw but laced with a quiet kind of understanding. Rachel nodded slowly. "Yes, Mark Dana. He's been arrested." Linda took a deep breath, the kind that felt like a release of years' worth of pain. She sat back down, the tension leaving her shoulders. Rachel sat down next to her, the silence settling between them. "I always knew," Linda said after a while, her voice trembling but firm. "I always knew something was wrong, but I couldn't prove it. And now, after all these years—" She shook her head, unable to finish. The flood of emotions was too much. Gallagher stood at the door, leaning against the frame, his hands in his pockets. "It's over," he said quietly. "But not for you." "Not for any of you." Rachel glanced at him and then back at Linda. "What will you do now?" Linda thought for a moment, her eyes casting toward the family photo on the wall, the one where Amanda was smiling beside her parents, a picture of innocence now lost in time. "I'm not sure. I think I need to let go of the anger, but I won't ever let go of her memory." Rachel nodded in understanding. The words that she had been seeking for so long now felt inadequate. No amount of words would ever fill the hollow left by a child lost too soon, a life stolen before it could truly begin. But for Linda, And for Amanda, there was a new kind of peace. The case was closed, but the memories of Amanda Fields would live on. As Rachel stood up to leave, she felt the weight of everything they had uncovered sink in. The darkness that had hung over the town of Omaha for years was finally lifted, but it had taken too long for this truth to come to light. Rachel looked at Gallagher once more. He nodded as if in silent acknowledgement of the toll this case had taken on them both. And for the first time, Rachel could finally close Amanda's file, knowing that the truth had set her free, and that justice had, at long last, been served. The streets of Omaha seemed quieter now, the echo of the case's resolution fading into the background of daily life. It was a strange silence, one that felt like the calm after a storm. The truth had been revealed, but the scars remained, deep and permanent, etched into the fabric of the Fields family and the town itself. Rachel sat at her desk, staring at the same file she'd been reviewing for weeks. Amanda's face, so young, so full of potential, smiled back at her from the photograph on top of the pile. That image was no longer just a reminder of a life lost, but of a family who had fought for years to keep the memory of their daughter alive. She picked up her phone, scrolling through the messages. There were words of congratulations from the newsroom, but they felt hollow. This wasn't a victory, this was closure. The difference was subtle, but it stung all the same. The sound of a knock on her door broke her concentration, and she looked up to see Gallagher standing there, his expression as unreadable as ever. He stepped in, his shoes heavy on the hardwood floor. "You've been quiet," he said, his voice low, almost uncertain. Rachel didn't answer immediately. Instead, she set the file down, her fingers lingering on the edges of the paper, as if trying to hold on to something she couldn't quite name. "I keep thinking about Linda," she said finally. "About how she'll move on from this. I don't think you ever truly move on from losing someone like that." Gallagher nodded, his jaw tightening. "No, you don't, but you learn to live with it." "You have to." Rachel looked at him, feeling the weight of his words. He'd been carrying this burden for so long. He'd never let it go, even when the case had been buried. I'm glad we found the truth. For Amanda's sake, for her family. But it feels like it's too little, too late." Gallagher sat across from her, his eyes never leaving hers. "You did good, Rachel. You brought the truth back. That matters. Sometimes that's all you can do." They sat in silence for a while, both reflecting on the long, painful journey it had taken to reach this point. Rachel had started this case as an outsider, a journalist trying to make a name for herself. But now it had become personal. She had crossed a line, and the weight of the responsibility was heavy. But it was a burden she was willing to carry. She stood up, her resolve hardening. "I'm going to visit Linda. I want to make sure she's okay now that everything's finally out in the open." Gallagher stood too, his hands in his pockets. "You should. She might need someone to talk to." Rachel nodded, grateful for the suggestion. As she headed for the door, she paused, looking back at him. "You ever think about what you could have done differently?" Gallagher's eyes softened, and he exhaled slowly. "Every day. But I couldn't change what happened. None of us could. But we got her justice. That's what matters." Rachel nodded, feeling the weight of the words settle into her chest. Justice was a complicated thing, but it was the only thing she had to offer. As she walked out into the cool evening air, Rachel felt a sense of finality. The case had been closed, but the journey wasn't over. It never really would be. The scars would remain, but Amanda Fields' story had been heard, and that was enough for now. Rachel stood on the porch of the Fields' new home, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the yard. The wind had started to pick up, swirling the leaves across the ground, carrying with it the promise of a change. She hadn't expected this moment to feel so heavy. Closure wasn't as simple as she had imagined. Linda Fields opened the door before Rachel could knock, her face a mixture of exhaustion and relief. She had aged in the years of searching for Amanda, the toll of grief and unanswered questions written in the lines on her face. But today there was something different in her eyes. The quiet storm that had consumed her for so long was finally easing, even if just a little. "Come in, Rachel," Linda said softly, stepping aside to let her in. Rachel entered the house, the familiar scent of vanilla and freshly brewed coffee in the air. It was the same house where Amanda had spent so many hours, but now it felt different. The walls, which had once been filled with emptiness, seemed to carry the weight of memories, both painful and healing. They sat at the kitchen table, the room warm but heavy with silence. Rachel glanced at the framed photo on the counter. Amanda laughing with her parents, her bright eyes full of life. It was hard to reconcile that image with the reality of what had happened. "I didn't think I'd ever see the day when I could have peace," Linda said, her voice thick with emotion. She reached for the coffee cup in front of her, her hands trembling slightly. "I thought I'd be waiting forever, for answers, for closure, and for something." Rachel nodded, her heart heavy. "I know it doesn't fix everything, Linda, but knowing the truth, that's something." Linda looked at her, her eyes searching. "It is. I won't lie and say it's easy, but I can't keep carrying this anger. It wasn't healthy for me, for Robert. We need to start healing now." Rachel felt the weight of the moment, the magnitude of what they had all been through. For Linda, the journey had been long, and the scars were deep, but the first step toward healing had been taken. "We've all been waiting for the truth, but I think for the first time I can start moving forward," Linda continued, her voice quieter now. "I don't know how, but I'm going to try. For Amanda. She deserved more than this long pain." Rachel stayed with Linda for a while longer, talking about Amanda, remembering the bright, determined young woman she had been. For Linda, those memories were bittersweet, but they were beginning to outweigh the anger. There was a sense of peace in the house that hadn't been there for decades. As Rachel left, she looked back at the Fields home one last time. She had witnessed the closure of a case, but more than that, she had seen the healing of a family who had waited far too long for justice. The road ahead for Linda and Robert would not be easy, but the truth had finally given them something they hadn't had in years, the chance to heal. Rachel felt the weight of her own journey too. She had started this investigation as a way to find answers, but what she had discovered was deeper. She had uncovered the human cost of justice and the resilience of a family determined to remember their daughter. As she drove away, she realized that the case, though closed, would stay with her forever. Some stories, like Amanda's, didn't end with a simple conclusion. They were a part of something bigger, a reminder of what justice should look like, and the price it sometimes demands. A year had passed since the case of Amanda Fields had been solved, and yet Omaha still felt the weight of it all. Rachel had returned to her normal routine as a journalist, her podcast now focused on other cold cases. But every time she drove past the Fields neighborhood, she thought of the family, of Amanda's face frozen in that photograph. Smiling, full of life. It wasn't the first time she had visited them since the trial. Linda and Robert had started to find their way back to something resembling normalcy. They had made peace with the truth, but peace didn't erase the years of grief. Still, there was a subtle change. The house had more laughter now, less silence. It wasn't perfect, but it was healing. Rachel sat in her small office, staring at the latest draft of her article about Amanda's case. The headline still didn't feel right. Justice finally served for Amanda Fields, but it was what the world would see. She picked up her phone and dialed Gallagher's number. The phone rang twice before he picked up, his voice familiar yet distant. "Gallagher," he said. "It's Rachel. I just finished the article on Amanda." I was thinking about how everything has changed, how everything is different now, but it still doesn't feel finished." Gallagher paused on the other end, his voice softening. "You don't get to close the door on something like this." "Not really. You can find justice, but the pieces still linger." "I know," Rachel said, leaning back in her chair. "It's strange. There's peace, but it's almost like the case lives on in all of us. In the town, in the way people talk about it, in the way they look at me when I walk by, like they're remembering what happened." "That's the thing about truth," Gallagher said. "It never really goes away. It sticks with you, and whether people want to talk about it or not, it's always there. The quiet stuff. The things people don't say." Rachel stared out the window, the world outside still turning, people going about their business, unaware of the weight the Fields family had carried for so long. I hope Amanda isn't forgotten, Gallagher. I hope she's always remembered for more than just this story. She will be, Gallagher replied, his voice firm. People like Amanda, who are stolen from us too soon, they leave a mark, and sometimes that mark is bigger than any headline. Rachel smiled faintly, grateful for his perspective. The truth had a way of doing that, leaving something behind, even when it felt like the world had moved on. I'm going to visit the fields tomorrow, Rachel said, standing up and pacing around the room. I think they need to hear that they're not alone in this, even now, even a year later. You're doing good, Rachel, Gallagher said, and you're right. Those people who keep the memory alive, they're the ones who make sure nothing gets forgotten. The line went silent for a moment. Take care of yourself, Gallagher added. Rachel hung up, her heart feeling full of both sadness and hope. She had done what she set out to do. The story was over, but the ripples of Amanda's life would continue. She grabbed her coat and keys, ready to visit Linda and Robert again. A year may have passed, but the journey was far from over, and in a way, it never really would be.